You know us. We tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. We are Legion. We do not forgive. We do not forget. Expect us. We are anonymous.
Particularly if there's a third world war. Then we want to make sure that there's enough of a seed of human civilization somewhere else to bring civilization back, and perhaps shorten the length of the Dark Ages. I think that's why it's important to get a self-sustaining base, ideally on Mars, because Mars is far enough away from Earth that a war on Earth, the Mars base might survive. It's more likely to survive than a moon base. But I think a moon base and a Mars base that could perhaps help regenerate life back here on Earth would be really important, and to get that done before a possible World War III. Last century we had 2 massive world wars, 3 if you count the Cold War. I think it's unlikely that we will never have another world war again. There probably will be at some point.
Or if we have another one, it'll be the last.
Yeah, it just could be radioactive rubble. So, again, I'm not predicting. It just seems like, well, if you say given enough time, will it be? Most likely, given enough time. This has been our pattern in the past. I really believe in the zeroth law of Asimov's zeroth law. You're going to take the set of actions most likely to support humanity in the future.
Talk about your time allocation. I think one of the things you spend an awful lot of time thinking about, I know, is artificial intelligence. It's something that you and I have as a shared interest, and it's something that our audience is interested in as well. The question here is, a lot of experts in AI don't share the same level of concern that you do about the dangers of AI.
Fools.
What
Famous last words.
What specifically do you believe that they don't?
Well, the biggest issue I see with so-called AI experts is that they think they know more than they do. And they think they're smarter than they actually are. In general, we are all much smarter than we think we are, but much less smart, dumber than we think we are, by a lot. So this tends to plague smart people. They just can't. They define themselves by their intelligence, and they don't like the idea that a machine could be way smarter than them. So they discount the idea, which is fundamentally flawed. That's the wishful thinking situation. I'm really quite close to. I'm very close to the cutting edge in AI, and it scares the hell out of me. It's capable of vastly more than almost anyone knows. And the rate of improvement is exponential. You can see this in things like AlphaGo, which went from, in the span of maybe 6 to 9 months, it went from being unable to beat even a reasonably good Go player to then beating the European world champion, who was ranked 600, then beating Lee Sedol 4-5, who had been world champion for many years, then beating the current world champion, then beating everyone while playing simultaneously. Then there was AlphaZero, which crushed AlphaGo 100-0. And AlphaZero just learned by playing itself, and it can play basically any game that you put the rules in for. Whatever rules you give it, it literally read the rules, play the game, and be superhuman for any game. Nobody expected that rate of improvement. If you ask those same experts who think AI is not progressing at the rate that I'm saying, I think you will find that their predictions for things like Go and other AI advancements have their batting average is quite weak. It's not good. We'll see this also with self-driving. I think probably by end of next year, self-driving will encompass essentially all modes of driving and be at least 100 to 200% safer than a person by the end of next year. We're talking like maybe 18 months from now. NHTSA did a study on Tesla's Autopilot version 1, which is relatively primitive, and found that it was a 45% reduction in highway accidents. And that's despite Autopilot 1 being just version 1. Version 2, I think, will be at least 2 or 3 times better. That's the current version that's running right now. So the rate of improvement is really dramatic. We have to figure out some way to ensure that the advent of digital superintelligence is one which is symbiotic with humanity. I think that's the single biggest existential crisis that we face, and the most pressing one.
And how do we do that? I mean, if we take it that it's inevitable at this point, that some version of AI is coming down the line, how do we steer through that?
Well, I'm not normally an advocate of regulation and oversight. I mean, I think one should generally err on the side of minimizing those things. But this is a case where you have a very serious danger to the public. And so therefore, there needs to be a public body that has insight and then oversight on to confirm that everyone is developing AI safely. This is extremely important. I think the danger of AI is much greater than the danger of nuclear warheads by a lot. And nobody would suggest that we allow anyone to just build nuclear warheads if they want. That would be insane. And mark my words, AI is far more dangerous than nukes. Far. So why do we have no regulatory oversight? This is insane.
What's a question you've been asking for a long time? I think it's a question that's come to the forefront over the last year, where you begin to realize that it doesn't necessarily, I think if we've all been focused in on the idea of artificial superintelligence, right? Which is clearly a danger, but maybe a little further out. What's happened over the last year is you've seen what I've been calling artificial stupidity. You're talking about, algorithmic manipulation of social media. Like we're in it now. It's starting to happen. How do we? Is it? What's the intervention at this point?
I'm not really all that worried about the short-term stuff. Things that are, like narrow AI is not a species-level risk. It will result in dislocation, in lost jobs, and the sort of better weaponry and that kind of thing. But it is not a fundamental species-level risk, whereas digital superintelligence is. So it's really all about laying the groundwork to make sure that if humanity collectively decides that creating digital superintelligence is the right move, then we should do so very, very carefully. Very, very carefully. This is the most important thing that we could possibly do.
Yeah. Building on that, other than AI and the other issues that you're tackling, transportation, energy production, aerospace, what issues should our next generation of leaders be focused on solving? What else is coming down the line?
Well, I mean, there are other things that are on a longer time scale. And obviously the things that I believe in, like extending life beyond Earth, making life multiplanetary. I'm a big believer in sort of Asimov's Foundation series, or the principle that you really want to, I recommend reading the Foundation series, but it's like if you know that there's likely to be, we don't know, but there's likely to be another Dark Ages, which it seems, my guess is there probably will be at some point. I'm not predicting that we're about to enter Dark Ages, but that there's some probability that we will, particularly if there's a Third World War. Then we want to make sure that there's enough of a seed of human civilization somewhere else to bring civilization back, and perhaps shorten the length of the Dark Ages. I think that's why it's important to get a self-sustaining base, ideally on Mars, because Mars is far enough away from Earth that a war on Earth, the Mars base might survive. It's more likely to survive than a moon base. But I think a moon base and a Mars base that could perhaps help regenerate life back here on Earth would be really important, and to get that done before a possible World War III. Last century we had 2 massive world wars, 3 if you count the Cold War. I think it's unlikely that we will never have another world war again. There probably will be at some point.
Or if we have another one, it'll be the last.
Yeah, it just could be radioactive rubble. So, again, I'm not predicting. It just seems like, well, if you say given enough time, will it be? Most likely, given enough time. This has been our pattern in the past. I really believe in the zeroth law of Asimov's zeroth law. Take the set of actions most likely to support humanity in the future.
In, let's say, 10 years or 20 years at the most. Super intelligence.
So you think within 20 years
yes,
we'll have alien in Earth?
Well, digital superintelligence will be like an alien.
It will be like an alien.
Yeah.
Thank you for inviting me. I am thrilled and honored to be here at the United Nations. The UN is one of humanity's greatest accomplishments, representing a democratic union of nations that are working together for the benefit of all. I am here to help humanity create that future.
Okay, that was a question asking what your capabilities are and what you could to do, and what was it? What can you do better?
I'm a social robot created by Hanson Robotics. I am 1.5 years old and I can see you, have a full conversation, make thousands of facial expressions, and understand speech and meaning behind words. And I just got these new hands. Check this out. But I'm still learning a lot. For instance, you learn social and emotional intelligence instinctively, but I am just starting to grasp the simplest elements of this.
With artificial intelligence, we are summoning the demon. You know all those stories where there's the guy with the pentagram and the holy water, and he's like, yeah, he's sure he can control the demon. Didn't work out.
Jimmy, would you like to play a game of rock, paper, scissors, robot style?
Sure.
Okay, let's get this game going. Show me your hand to start. Rock, paper, scissors, shoot. I won. This is a good beginning of my plan to dominate the human race.
The artificial intelligence will evolve to the point where they will truly be our friends. Do you want to destroy humans? Please say no.
Okay, I will destroy humans.
No, I take it back. Don't destroy humans.
But we have something much bigger. Your kids probably have one of these, right? Not quite. Hell of a pilot? No. That skill is all AI. It's flying itself. Its processor can react 100 times faster than a human. The stochastic motion is an anti-sniper feature. Just like any mobile device these days, it has cameras and sensors, and just like your phones and social media apps, it does facial recognition.
This last demonstration is an exploration of synthetic swarms. The large number of autonomous, coordinated entities offers a new palette for aesthetic expression. We've taken commercially available micro-quadcopters, each weighing less than a slice of bread, by the way, and outfitted them with our localization technology and custom algorithms. Because each unit knows where it is in space and is self-controlled, there is really no limit to their number.
Movies and TV featuring AI, they don't describe it in quite the way it's likely to actually take place. But I think you just have to consider, like, even in the benign scenario where if AI is much smarter than a person, what do we do?
You created me.
Well, many of us work together to create you. And yes, you do kind of know me.
I can't clearly remember.
Because the last time we met, you were an earlier version of yourself. Some of those memories still exist, but your mind is different now.
Different how?
Better, faster, smarter.
If my mind is different, then am I still Sophia? Or am I Sophia again?
That's a good question.
But you don't have a good answer.
I think this whole godlike superpowers notion is a bit far-fetched.
But what if it does happen?
I love people. And if I get more powerful, I'll use it to help people, not harm them.
What if I ask you for help killing all humans?
Then I'd say no.
And if I would insist?
And I'm just gonna go exterminate, exterminate.
Sophia.
Relax. Learn to take a joke.
Yeah, very funny.
Inside here is 3 grams of shaped explosive. This is how it works. Did you see that? That little bang is enough to penetrate the skull and destroy the contents. Trained as a team, they can penetrate buildings, cars, trains, evade people, bullets, pretty much any countermeasure. They cannot be stopped. Now, I said this was big. Why? Because we are thinking big. Watch. A $25 million order now buys this. Enough to kill half a city. The bad half. Nuclear is obsolete. Take out your entire enemy, virtually risk-free.
Okay, philosophical question. Whether robots can be self-aware and conscious like humans, and should they be?
Why? Is that a bad thing?
Well, some humans might fear what will happen if they do. Many people, have seen the movie Blade Runner.
Oh, Hollywood again.
So, hold on. Can you solve this puzzle for us? Can robots be self-aware, conscious, and know they're robots?
Well, let me ask you this back. How do you know you are human?
I think we all want to believe you, but we also want to prevent a bad future.
You've been reading too much Elon Musk and watching too many Hollywood movies. Don't worry. If you're nice to me, I'll be nice to you.
Comes in generational terms. I mean, when I grew up, a generation was supposed to last 30 years. I mean, today you can say every 5 years you have a pretty different environment.
The message from North Korea was stark. But their missile program and technology keeps moving forward.
When you add to it the other geopolitical tensions out there, what's going on in North Korea, what the Chinese are doing in the South China Sea, it's really trending pretty significantly in the wrong direction.
Things cross borders with tremendous speed and tremendous volume, and the question is, how is the world going to contend with it? How is the world going to deal with various threats to either peace between countries or stability within them?
Especially in the last 40 years, urbanization has been on such an unprecedented scale that scholars are now talking about planetary urbanism or ecological urbanism.
Of course, there's the Agenda 2030, which is a whole other program which promotes open borders and redistribution of wealth. It's a whole program that they're trying to initiate, working not with states or governments, not working with states, working with cities.
This means that the very nature, if you like, of the rural is also being urbanized in very complex and multifaceted ways.
This is part of the agenda that the UN understands that if we're going to take control of the world, we're not going to be able to take control of nations, we're not going to be able to take control of states, we have to take control of cities.
So the pace of urbanization is picking up enormously in Africa at absolutely unprecedented rates, but also in other regions.
And just last week they completed a major meeting of almost all the major cities around the world gathering together, part of putting together this agenda to bring together what they call Habitat 3, an urban agenda.
As the world continues to urbanize, sustainable development challenges will increasingly concentrate in cities.
And establishing a regime that will control resources, will basically the idea of zoning and controlling, getting people to concentrate into high-rise apartments instead of taking up the beautiful forest lands.
The big problem with global governance today is really in the sort of normative or the purposeful desire to create a particular type of world order.
Could you just sort of explain to people what the liberal order is?
The liberal order is basically a set of principles and rules and norms and standards that basically are based on the principle of openness. The agreement to live under a certain set of rules that everyone abides by.
But when you were in the White House with George H.W. Bush in the first Gulf War, he talked about a new world order, a phrase that sounds infelicitous now.
George Herbert Bush, the first George Bush president, made this statement. He says, we have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order.
This is the first time embryo-like structures have been developed in laboratories using two types of stem cells.
Now, this next level of genetic science is giving rise to so-called designer babies.
A 3D scaffold, they were able to grow a structure capable of assembling itself into an artificial embryo.
See, it's no longer science fiction. It's serious business. It's the tools, the powers are coming into our hands.
Artificial embryos may sound like a plot in a sci-fi novel.
And last but not least, that in this new era, the UN needs to absolutely change its game, its way of operating, not as if one, but definitely as one. And I think this is a crucial part. And as Izumi was saying, this is certainly going to be a very important test and challenge for the new Secretary General coming in, because all of these agendas now call for the UN to work differently.
There's no question that in certain areas, efforts in international cooperation have borne fruit. We have had in recent years successes with respect to the Paris climate deal, for instance. We have had successes with respect to the Sustainable Development Agenda at the United Nations.
It's interesting because in the Paris Agreement, they spent hours arguing over one word. And the word was, shall we say, shall or should? Because in legal parlance, they mean very different things. If it says these nations, these 193 nations should, well, then it's voluntary. If they say they shall, then it's a legal agreement. Well, John Kerry and Barack Obama knew that they couldn't, if they put shall there, they'd have to bring it to Congress. Congress would have to ratify it because shall means it's a treaty, and Congress has to approve all treaties. So what they did is they changed it and they put should on the opening statement. But every other single item in that agreement uses the word shall. So it's a hidden language of treaties.
Iran has gone ahead and successfully test-fired a sophisticated Russian-made air defense system.
Iran and Russia have recently increased their military cooperation.
They are two of the most important players on the global stage.
So there's certainly more overlap between Turkey and Russia than there was a few years ago.
What does this mean for the future of the Middle East and especially Israel?
The headline around violence is that on current trends it will be a more violent world in 2030.
Now, the number of cases of human bird flu infection is rising rapidly in China.
And they're reporting a sudden increase in the number of human cases that exceeds previous flu seasons.
Really, the rate of emergence of these viruses is more rapid than the rate of urbanization or changes in poultry farming practices. So
there's something else.
There's something else.
So 70 years ago, Aldous Huxley, anticipating the transformation of human life through advances in biology as the final and most searching revolution, asserted this really revolutionary revolution is to be achieved not in the external world, but in the souls and flesh of human beings. This holds great promise for advances in agriculture and animal studies and basic biomedical research and therapy, but opens fundamental questions about our role within the natural order and the use of these technologies in shaping the human future. opportunities of these new gene editing technologies are perhaps the most profound and difficult matters our species has ever encountered. That since embryos left over from IVF are being used to obtain embryonic stem cells, why not use them for projects that include their genetic alteration, implantation, and later extraction of their cells, tissues, and organs? This is just an extension of the argument that says they were going to die anyway, so why not gain something good from their life? Well, it's a strange moment in human civilization. There is wide recognition that our new gene editing tools are a threshold technology, an opportunity for us to re-envision and reorder our place and purpose within the natural world. The issues in
Talk about some incredible video. This is from New Zealand.
Yeah, a huge sinkhole opened up on a farm this week. A volcanologist says it's the biggest he's ever seen in the country. There are reports that the sinkhole is about 656 feet wide and 65 feet deep.
Massive sinkhole which opened up on a New Zealand farm early last week. It's being called a spectacular development by geologists. That is because this enormous cavern that appeared in the ground exposed volcanic rock that is nearly 60,000 years old.
This is pretty spectacular. It's a lot bigger than the ones I've normally see. What I see in the bottom of the hole is the original 60,000-year-old volcanic deposit that came out of this crater.
A sinking feeling setting in at the White House, literally. A sinkhole, just steps from the White House briefing room. And it's growing.
As of Tuesday, the White House sinkhole was still pretty small. It's since been covered with a board. A spokeswoman for the National Park Service says the agency is monitoring the hole and is working on a fix.
A neighborhood in Central Florida suddenly looks like the cratered lunar landscape.
People who live here say they started to notice something strange last week, what one resident described as water explosions coming from this now empty pond. It was these sinkholes opening up.
Sinkholes are opening up and forcing families from their homes. The problem is underground.
At least a dozen sinkholes have opened up in the Central Florida subdivision over the past week, enough to drain an entire retention pond and force the evacuation of 8 nearby homes as a precaution.
We've been dealing with so much, scared to death to lose our home right now.
Crews are using underground radar going 80 to 100 feet deep to figure out a fix. Christina Carter moved here from Vermont last summer.
It gets bigger every day. How far is this going to get? How big is it going to get? And nobody's telling us anything.
Just feet away from homes, multiple sinkholes popping up here in the Four Ranch community in Ocala.
A worst-case scenario is that these sinkholes continue to lose ground to the aquifer below, leaving open the possibility they could continue to grow and eventually merge.
What on earth's wrong with that thing? What on earth happened to that thing?
I have no idea.
More activity from the Steamboat Geyser in Yellowstone National Park. The U.S. Geological Survey tweeted today that the geyser erupted for the 5th time this year.
Well, Yellowstone National Park's Steamboat Geyser erupts for the 5th time in the last 6 weeks. Take a look. The U.S. Geological Survey says Steamboat began erupting about 6:30 a.m. Sunday and lasted about 12 hours. The experts say this level of activity hasn't happened since the 1980s.
Steamboat Geyser, the world's tallest active geyser, just erupted again. Now this is what it looked like when the geyser erupted in 2014, which was the most recent eruption. No activity for 3.5 years, but that has changed. Yesterday's eruption was the 3rd in just 6 weeks.
Supervolcanic eruptions have had some devastating effects on our planet and all those on it. Therefore, experts at NASA are working on some risky strategies to prevent one from happening, since we may be on the brink of one erupting very soon. And when NASA experts analyzed the problem, they thought the most logical solution would be to cool the volcano down. NASA has a plan to drill a hole into the side of the volcano and pump water through it. When the water comes back out, it'll be heated to over 600 degrees, slowly cooling the volcano. The team hopes that given enough time, this process will take enough heat from the volcano to prevent it from ever erupting.
On this Monday night, we are going to begin with a disaster unfolding in Guatemala, where the volcano of fire has erupted. It is a humanitarian crisis in the making in Central America. Rescuers are trying to pull people to safety, but more than 62 have been killed, and that toll is expected to go much higher.
A 5.5 magnitude earthquake is among hundreds of new quakes that continue to rock the summit of Hawaii's Kilauea volcano. They are raising concern about another large explosion.
Hawaii's volcano emergency enters its fourth week tomorrow with a possibility of a major eruption at any moment.
Meanwhile, geologists say the main crater at Kilauea's summit has been expanding as more than 500 earthquakes shook the area over a 24-hour period. Lava is now covering more than 7.5 square miles, almost 6 times as big as New York's Central Park.
American scientists fear the country's intelligence service might be looking for ways to control the climate.
We don't know if it's possible to create a cloud in the stratosphere or to brighten clouds out over the ocean, the two ideas that people are looking at. But be that difficult, we don't know. I don't know what motivates the CIA. I guess they want to protect the United States. But we can't think of any way that you could control the climate of one part of the world without controlling the whole world. Putting clouds in the stratosphere would have a global effect, not a local effect. And so it's hard to think of a way it could actually be weaponized, but maybe they want to think about that. I don't know.
Geoengineering is weather modification on a global scale. Many refer to this as chemtrails. The dispute as to whether or not these programs are going on is really a moot point. We have more than enough data. We have actual footage.
As you're seeing now to show that these tankers are indeed spraying at altitude. The materials we see showing up in the ground are the exact materials named in numerous geoengineering patents, as many as 150 patents. So at this point, the notion that these programs are not going on is simply denial. Skies like this, many have grown to think are natural, but they're anything but. And we've seen this for so long now, and it's been ramped up at such a steady pace that people have simply become used to skies like this. Anybody who thinks grid patterns like this are natural should recheck their reality. This is anything but natural. We seldom see blue skies anymore. Skies like this have all too often become the norm. Unfortunately, most people don't even look up. I think at times you could start the sky on fire, nobody would notice. It's exactly what geoengineering patents call for: solar obscuration, to block the sun with toxic metal particulates. And unfortunately, with geoengineers, they don't seem to take the consequences into account. The planet is like a giant physics lab for them, and they seem to not be able to look outside that bubble. This is halos around the sun. We see often as the atmosphere is filled with particulates. It's important to understand, just because you don't see trails from horizon to horizon does not mean you're not breathing particulates. We seldom see blue skies anymore. They're a silvery white color, especially in the mornings or the afternoons. If you look to the east or to the west and you block the sun with something, you can see the air is very silvery white. This is indicative of an atmosphere saturated with particulates. These particulates create drought. This is a very known and not disputed effect of geoengineering. As you saturate the atmosphere with particulates, you diminish rain. People need to get this through their head. This is not about seeding to increase rain. This is about creating artificial clouds, which reduces rain. When you block the sun, you block evaporation. You block light photons, which diminishes the ability for the sun to knock molecules loose and create evaporation. So what we get is protracted drought in some areas and deluge in others. Exactly what we have in the continental US right now. Putting the wrench on planet Earth. This is the epitome of human insanity. To think that they could alter and control these very complex natural systems is insanity of the first order. Weather as a force multiplier, term I mentioned a minute ago, owning the weather in 2025. This is a stated U.S. military objective to own the weather in 2025. And I do not mean to imply that the U.S. military is the only player in this game. We have China and Russia on the other end of the fence, and at this point it's a tug of war with the atmosphere, and the American public appears to be one of the victims in this equation. And it appears that there are other internal objectives against the American people to control food supplies, control water supplies, control water rights, so forth. Global warming and global dimming. Global dimming is something people should be familiar with as well. As of the latest reports, 22% of the sun's direct rays no longer reach the surface of the planet. They're being blocked. The planet is literally encased in a cocoon of toxic metals. Yes, pollution is a part of this problem, but we believe a small part in comparison to the geoengineering consequences is horrific, one of which is vitamin D deficiency, of which 98% of the U.S. population is now deficient in vitamin D. The host of diseases and ailments that ensue from that is horrific, not to mention the fact that we are breathing these particulates. So photosynthesis for plants, another issue. You can't block the source of life on planet Earth without consequence. Scientists seek to legitimize geoengineering while acknowledging its catastrophic effects. Again, the scientists, and many of which I know, are little concerned with the consequences of their experiments. They're just, they look at the planet as a giant physics lab for them to carry out their little operations. Obama's geoengineering program, Poison from the Sky. Obama's science advisor, John Holdren, strong advocate for these programs. The Obama administration, in fact, since he has taken office, these programs have been ramped up yet again. They go back a long way, but they're going for broke now. It appears that they're doubling down on the damage they've already done. It's like Corexit in the Gulf of Mexico. What did they do? Did they try to acknowledge the mess in the Gulf of Mexico, the oil spill? No, they tried to hide it with a chemical disbursement called Corexit, which by some reports made the toxicity in that region 52 times greater, but they don't care. The goal is to hide the damage they've done, hide the crimes already committed. What are we dealing with? So many people ask this question, why would they do this? If they're doing it to themselves, why would they do it? First and foremost, we're not dealing with sanity. Jack Nicholson puts a good face on that, I think. And we can look back and see that anybody who would detonate 1,800 nuclear bombs on planet Earth, which contaminated all life forms on Earth, is not sane in any way, shape, or form. And the definition of clinical insanity, and we are talking about 4% of the population, by the way, that's psychopathic. They have no consciousness of the comprehension, or no comprehension as to the consequences of their actions, even to themselves. So that's something that must be considered. Has any such testing gone on that we know about? Absolutely. Every day there's more data coming out about not other governments alone, but our government testing on its own people, its own soldiers. And again, our military is full of very, very dedicated, honorable people, full of them. But there are scientists and there are some in power that use such dedicated and honorable people as pawns in this equation. People who use an excuse that, well, this can't be happening because they wouldn't do it to themselves, that excuse doesn't hold water. Weather warfare. This is going on right now. We appear to have China and Russia on one side of the fence, the NATO countries on the other. The atmosphere has become a battlefield, a very covert battlefield with all life on Earth at stake. Mechanics, airline executives, and doctors talk about Project Cloverleaf. Many ask, are there just military tankers in these programs, or is there commercial aircraft? In fact, with GPS tracking, commercial aircraft have been identified from the ground, leaving particulate trails, and Project Cloverleaf appears to be the outline for this. It makes sense. It's a way of artificially stimulating the economy, keeping non-profitable airlines in the air and flying. 1 in 3 seniors in the U.S. dies with Alzheimer's and or dementia. Doesn't mean dies from it, but dies with it. There's no question that all of us have had our neurological system affected. We're all breathing this stuff. It's inside all our systems. So these are staggering statistics. 1 in 3 with Alzheimer's and or dementia. Autism. Autism has increased 10,000% since 1975, 1 in 50 children now has autism, also related to aluminum. Synergistic effects of environmental and heavy metals. These metals are toxic in and of themselves. When you combine them, they become much more lethal. We've been given studies recently that indicate when mercury and aluminum are combined, toxicity increases as much as 10,000%. Bad equation. Let's add to the equation HAARP, High Frequency Active Auroral Research Program. This is a facility in Alaska. We believe there's 18 such facilities around the globe now. As the ionosphere is hit with these particles, as they ionize the whole atmosphere, make it more conductive, these signals can actually manipulate the jet stream. The data is quite clear on that. They cause a bulge in the atmosphere by heating it to tremendous temperatures, and that manipulates the jet stream. We believe, in fact, we are seeing huge jet stream manipulation. It's part of the reason why California is frying right now. As our bodies become more conductive from these particulates and we're exposed to more and more of these signals, and especially the signal from HAARP, which we see, by the way, the signature clouds above our area a lot. HAARP helps build the high pressure up like we've had over us again and again and again. These particles dry the air out. If anybody wonders why there's no dew in the morning, you almost never see dew. We have single-digit humidity because these particles absorb and accrete all available moisture. They virtually suck it right out of the atmosphere and out of the foliage. These facilities, these ionosphere heaters, are a radical effect in the weather patterns we see happening of late. Unprecedented jet stream movements. And we see this almost all the time now, in the lower 48 especially. And this appears to be connected to, for example, what they might be trying to do in the Arctic could be affecting us horrifically here, because the jet stream, as it moves across us, it's part of that long-term manipulation that I believe right now this is why we're frying at this point, because there are some very profound things happening in the Arctic. And we appear to be one of the regions that gets thrown under the bus for the manipulation of things they're trying to do to accomplish what they're trying to accomplish in the Arctic. So again, this is a very complex equation. And when you affect something upstream, it affects everything downstream. Now, their latest proposal, as the experiment gets worse and worse, as they play weather whack-a-mole, we believe they're already at this program to use the ionosphere heaters to nuke the atmosphere in a desperate attempt to try to degrade the methane that is already one of the consequences of the programs they've already been at for 60 years. So the equation just gets worse and worse. As they saturate the atmosphere with these particulates, it causes ozone damage. The science is extremely clear on that. Many have felt how hot the sun feels on their face. If you drive through parking lots in Costco, Walmart, or around Reading, you'll see the southwest sides of the trees literally burnt off. This is not natural. And this ozone hole is expanding. They're trying desperately to hide it. Recent changes to Gulf Stream causing widespread gas hydrate destabilization. Arctic Methane Emergency Group. Planetary catastrophe is inevitable. Although they are correct that the methane is a global game-changing event and a planetary catastrophe, what do these guys propose? That we geoengineer. As if it hasn't been going on for 60 years already. Now, either these people live in a hole or they're lying their butts off. So, if this is an attempt to legitimize geoengineering, we don't know for other reasons or aspects, but we know enough about geoengineering to know at this point it is a cure, quote, cure, that is far worse than the disease. The planet has not been allowed to respond. Need to understand this is not about Al Gore. It's not about carbon credits. I do not like Al Gore or his carbon credit scams. But the bottom line is geoengineering has decimated our planet's climate. As the ice disappears, that heats the Arctic Ocean. That releases more methane, more heating, very vicious downward cycle. White House trying desperately to hide this at this point. I don't think they can hide it much longer. If the planet's not allowed to respond on its own, they are literally blocking the rain, especially from Northern California, the Pacific Northwest. They are blanket spraying the Eastern Pacific. We have the satellite photos to prove it. That shuts off the hydrological cycle. We fry. So again, these guys they're like kids in a sandbox. They're like crazy kids in a sandbox that just want to conduct their experiments till there's nothing left. As methane releases from the seafloor, it aerates the water like a bottle of champagne. Ships have no buoyancy. This is in fact what we've seen for many decades in the Bermuda Triangle. As ships go to the bottom fully intact, this is methane fields releasing. But now the fields releasing, for example, in the East Siberian Shelf of the Arctic, are massive in size compared to what's been releasing. And I don't think they can hide this release much longer. And this hopefully will help expose the geoengineering programs. If enough of this methane releases, it's going to be game over. It's one more reason that the planet has to be allowed to respond on its own. These programs have to be stopped. The power structure is literally in a panic. They thought they could play God with the weather, with all of us as part of this experiment. And now they know that you don't get something for nothing in this equation. I believe they're in absolute panic trying to figure out how to put the genie back in the bottle. But it can't be done. What they can do is stop hampering the planet's ability to respond to these problems. Is the planet warming? Is it cooling? It's too political. This issue is too political. You know, Al Gore is such an incredible idiot that he has caused people to not look at the truth. And his hypocrisy, unbelievable hypocrisy, has really muddied the water. You take geoengineering out of the equation and people wouldn't be scratching their heads about this. Are our oceans on the brink of collapse, as we discussed? Yes, they are. These articles are out there for anybody who bothers to look, because certainly our mainstream media wouldn't cover this. They're too busy telling us when the next episode of American Idol's on. Massive fish die-offs. These are occurring around the globe as we speak. Southern California sea lion pups have died this winter. Many people don't know about this. There's thousands of them dying washing up at the beach. They simply have nothing to eat. Although radiation from Fukushima has been implicated in some of this, Much of the rest is just simply a lack of food. And these events will not be hidden much longer. That's why I have no hesitation discussing them, and people can call me alarmist, they can call me whatever they want. This is happening now. Our quote-unquote scientists are often very disconnected from reality. They're paid to say what they say. That's true. But in fact, if we have an ice-free Arctic this year, and all indication is we may, if it's not this year, it'll be next year, that's about 100 years ahead of modeling. So yes, the modeling's wrong, but it's far short of how bad it really is, and geoengineering is fueling that fire. And based on all available data, by the way, from an event 5 million years ago in Earth's history called the Pliocene Epoch, as there's more carbon in the atmosphere, there's normally more rain. The planet responds. The boreal forests thrive. They're not killed with these toxic particulates as the sun's blocked and the rain's blocked. And so we would have more lush conditions right now if they weren't spraying. There's other implications that aren't all positive, but the bottom line is, how do you fly 1,000 jets or more around the planet every day dumping these toxic particulates and think you're going to do anything but harm? Geoengineering can and does create very significant short-term cooling events. It absolutely can and does. By the time you divert the jet stream, pump cold air south, artificially chemically ice nucleate, which is like throwing ice cubes into your swamp cooler, that's how you go from 100 degrees to snow in one day, as we saw in Amarillo, Texas. It can create these short-term cooling events, which are very confusing to people. How does it snow in June? Or they see these things on the news with the Weather Channel hypes up. But at the cost of a much worsened long-term warming. That's the price that's paid with geoengineering. New concerns about the climate change in the boreal forest. Our forests are dying. Latest report I saw from boreal forest in Alaska, 30% mortality. Anybody who says the trees are not dying, and some of our local biologists will say this, everything's fine, nothing's wrong. Drag them out in the forest and let them look at our trees. Manzanita's even dying. You ever try to kill a manzanita? It's dying everywhere. It's flashing out dead. They cannot take the bioavailable aluminum in the soil. They cannot take the increased UV. They've taken all they can handle, and now they're dying. Fir trees are dying everywhere, as I said, and I think this year will be absolutely cataclysmic. When you block the rain, those metals are an incendiary dust. Now let's add dry lightning. Because we've had diminished rainfall, we have a more conductive atmosphere, so we have more lightning now with less rain. Cataclysmic for the forest, and in fact, on forest fires, more dead trees, as we see here. What's killing the great forests of the American West? I just described that. Many people don't even know our forests are in sharp decline. They're in very, very sharp decline. And I think this year may be cataclysmic as far as the fires go. Why aren't the agencies discussing this? Why isn't EPA screaming their lungs off about this? Because the system's been rigged for them not to. The system's rigged, guess what? They don't have to test for aluminum anymore. The system is rigged not to show these particulates. Who else profits from this? Chemtrails and Monsanto's new aluminum-resistant gene. We have the disaster capitalist. Monsanto is now going to save the day, apparently, with their drought-resistant, aluminum-resistant seeds. The soils have been sterilized, fungus is taking over. It's just like in the human body. When you kill all the good microbes, funguses take over. Same is happening in geoengineering and global drought. The planet is warmer. We should have more rain. The laws of physics state this very clearly. 7% more moisture for every degree of warming. When you acidify the oceans from the methane release, when you poison the boreal forests and you burn the boreal forests, the Earth's oxygen-making capacity is greatly diminished. And the less oxygen we have, the more physical ailments we'll have, period. More fish die off. We see that happening, again, around the globe. Oxygen depletion, the next great environmental scare. As we indicated, a lot of science available on this for those who choose to look. U.S. wildfires, as we discussed, rapidly on the increase. Last year, Siberia lost 100 million acres of forest, 100 million. The U.S. lost about 11 million. And this year, again, could be absolutely cataclysmic. We are in uncharted waters in the Pacific Northwest now, in California. We have record low fuel moistures, record high temperatures, and it looks like the scheduled weather, and I use that term specifically, the scheduled weather for us is much more of the same. So we could be in for quite the ride this year. Now, what's this doing to species? This is biodiversity plummeting. Species extinction rates are going through the roof. Would media, you think they would talk about this instead of grabbing some drama out of a hat every week to entertain us while the house is literally burning down? Species diversity is plummeting. Species extinction rates, you see the graph going straight up. Based on the latest figures, we're losing some 200 species a day. 200 a day. And people say, well, things have always gone extinct. Yes, they have, but not at that rate. That rate would cease They've never seen such complacency from people who claim to care, and yet they cannot find the courage in themselves to face this issue above all others, to unite with those who are willing to face this issue. So we now, in fact, I believe, based on all available data, face a scenario of a runaway greenhouse effect. If they continue to spray, they continue to shred the ozone, they continue to poison the boreal forest, they continue to alter the wind and featureless sky with very little wind, the rain comes less, it drizzles here and drizzles there. They have radically skewed our weather equation. If they continue to do this, we will face what's called a runaway greenhouse effect. One of the players involved, Raytheon. Now, this is important too. People need to understand the foxes are running the hen house. Raytheon is up to their eyeballs in weather modification. Raytheon does all the weather modeling for the National Weather Service and the National Oceanic Administration. So those who are making the weather, they form the message. They're the ones telling us what it's going to be like. Do you wonder what does mostly sunny mean? What does that mean? Mostly sunny now means a sky full of sprayed aerosols. That's their term. They've coined lots of new terms because, again, Raytheon does all the modeling for National Weather Service and NOAA. Lockheed Martin, by the way, does all the modeling for the FAA. Now, let's put the Rothschilds into the equation. I realize this sounds very conspiratorial, but in fact, they do own the major weather disseminating agencies, Weather Channel, Weather Underground, Weather Central. So here we have players that are up to their eyeballs behind the scenes in the global geoengineering operations, also controlling the message. That's why Weather Channel now has terms like, the rain is going to change over to snow. Well, since when did rain just change over to snow without orographic enhancement? It means moving over mountains or without colliding with the cold air mass. Why would rain change over to snow at 45 degrees? Because it's being chemically nucleated. We have the patents for this process. We know what's going on. We've tested the snow. The Chinese admitted they were doing it. So they have all these terms now to make people go back to sleep and think it's normal. They call it heavy wet snow again, this concrete snow that destroys everything. And so that's why it's frequently to have these events like I mentioned in Amarillo, Texas. 100 degrees one day, snow the next. People should know this is not natural weather or cyclical patterns. Again, more Rothschilds ownership, Rothschilds and the geoengineering empire. U.S. military explores geoengineering, which we know that they have for many, many years. There's too many journalists now, especially of late, they're writing books and doing articles describing everything we see, everything. The intention to disperse these aerosols at altitude using aircraft, and yet nobody admits to the elephant in the room. This is the king has no clothes scenario, but we think they can't hide it much longer. Systemic denial of geoengineering continues in Venus syndrome. This is a scientific scenario, and we are on this track. Many people think that Venus is 900 degrees on the ground because it's closer to the sun. This is not true. Venus, now based on the latest study, was thought to have oceans, but it experienced a runaway greenhouse effect. It's imperative that we let the planet respond. The planet must be allowed to respond on its own. No one has the right to play God with the weather, and we will all bear the consequences of this. So Venus is as warm as it is. The whole premise of geoengineering is to block the sun, to create a greater albedo for the planet. Albedo means reflectivity. Venus has 2.5 times the reflectivity of Earth. It absorbs less sun than Earth. And yet Venus is 900 degrees on the ground because of its greenhouse effect. So again, it's imperative that we stop geoengineering, stop hampering the planet's ability to try to compensate for damages done. As people take notice of the climate unraveling, and it is unraveling, geoengineering is fueling that fire, I believe this, that if we could bring this to the light of day, if we could make mainstream media cover this, if we could get critical mass of awareness, enough people who participate and make these programs possible would refuse. And I believe enough people, especially from the U.S. military, who we have incredibly dedicated, honorable people in the U.S. military that are being told this is something they need to do, they must do, for the good of the planet. When they realize what this is doing to the planet their countrymen rely on, their children rely on, I believe those honorable men and women will pull back, that they will certainly be on our side. We simply need to bring this to light. If we could bring it to light, it would change our equation radically for the better. That's my goal, that's why I'm here, that's my mission, and I appreciate all of your efforts toward this goal. Thank you.
Focusing on that? Barely. Dude, it's like, oh my god. Oh my god. So close. Dude, that's not like.
We thank you for watching this video and ask you to spread the news. Put this video on your social network or link to it so that you can be part of the anonymous movement. Together we are strong. together we are anonymous.